Wake up, Real Sharks! It is time for another edition of our Wake Up Real Sharks webinar. My name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations. And today we have an exciting topic to go over with you. We're going to be talking about study tips for professional school and entrance exams. And we have various guest speakers with us, our regular experts, as well as some additional experts on the line. So I'm going to turn it over to them, let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the topic for the day.
Well, I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Courtney Stein. I am the Associate Director of Tutoring and Testing and also the Program Coordinator for the Razor's Edge Shark Teach program.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Soto. I'm the Assistant Director of Testing and Academic Success.
Thank you guys so much for being here. And hi everyone, my name is Gabby Gross and I'm an Excel Advisor in the Office of Career Development.
And last but not least, I'm Danny Kraukes-Suarez. I'm also a career advisor for Excel in our career development office.
So we have the dream team of experts on the webinar today. And we're going to be talking a lot about study tips for professional school entrance exams. Courtney and Stephanie are going to be experts on this, and so we're going to put them on the hot seat later on in the presentation and ask them a few questions, things that could provide you insights, especially this time of year where whether you're rising, senior going into, or junior just graduate going into your senior year and planning, or a senior taking the exams for the first time, we have a lot to kind of cover for the day. So jumping into the first slide, I wanted just to introduce a few concepts in terms of terms you're going to hear. There's a lot of professional exams for pre-health, and I think we've talked about it in other webinars, but just some common ones you're going to see. For MD, you're going to be taking the MCAT. For athletic training, you're going to be taking the GRE. Dental school, the DAT. Nursing, you take the NCLEX exam, and this is definitely prime time for that. OT, GRE, optometry, the OAT. DO is very similar to MD. You're going to be taking the MCAT. For pharmacy, the PCAT, PT, the GRE. And guys, you're going to see a lot of these different tests. This is a great resource to help you plan accordingly. A couple of other ones, pediatric medicine, the MCAT, and then public health, which I've seen this before. It's a combination, either the GRE or the MCAT. A lot of people end up doing dual programs for that, so it's a little bit why it offers both. And speech language pathology and audiology, GRE, and then finally veterinary medicine, another one that is the GRE or the MCAT. So a little bit introductory on terms, just because we're going to be talking about a lot of different professional exams, but this just can help you plan out if you weren't sure on which test kind of associates with the program of your interest. So now let's turn it over to one of our experts where we could talk a little bit about some general tips on preparing for this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emilio, for starting this off. I just wanted to start off by giving just some general tips on how to prepare for these professional exams. The first being know your baseline score and determine your target score from there. So really knowing the score that you're trying to achieve and preparing for that specifically. And to do that, take practice professional exams to really mimic those real testing conditions that you're going to experience at that time. And I know Stephanie and Courtney are going to go more into that a little bit later in the presentation. Also, prioritizing what's most critical for you. I think this is really one of the most important things I want to discuss on this slide. I have many students that I've worked with in the past and currently that have a hard time sometimes figuring out how do I put in studying with just everything else that I'm really working with, such as my extracurriculars and my current classes, everything like that. So really trying to prioritize what's critical for you when studying for these exams by creating a schedule or anything else that you need. So going into the next, just making a study plan, focusing on online programs or prep courses or those test prep books that you can use. So I know Kaplan is like a really popular one. I'm sure Stephanie and Courtney can go into some other ideas for you as a student to prepare. Going into the next, practicing for technique, not just the results. I think this is huge when it comes to exams. I think a lot of students think I'm going to start to memorize or I'm going to just start to make sure I get the results I need. But there is also a technique that you have to master with these different professional exams that you're preparing for. And then lastly, just managing your stress and really tuning out all of those distractions. So when you're studying, making sure that you are in like a stress-free environment, maybe turning off that phone or turning off, anything that really is a distractor for you, Netflix or anything that, students are into these days, and just making sure you're really focused on what you're trying to achieve. I do want to mention that whenever I speak to students about applying to professional school, I always say numbers are first. Numbers are the most important thing you should be focusing on. So that is your GPA, but that's also your test score. They are looking at this before they look at anything else. So you want to ensure that you're prioritizing this during your study time. Does anyone else have any tips that they want to share? Maybe Danny or Emilio?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you
I would
mentioned
say
some
with the
great
tuning out
startup in terms of
distractions,
making
I
a
think
study
that's,
plan.
oh, go on. Sorry. I think I got lagged out a bit.
No, you're good, Danny. Go give your points. I'll go right after you.
Sure. So I was saying for the tuning out distractions, I think that's so critical too, just because in that actual setting where you are taking either the MCAT or the GRE, whatever it may be, there's a lot of other students there beside you who may be maybe writing really loudly or breathing loudly, or it's just a lot of different distractions that may knock you off from that practice setting you typically put yourself in. So being able to tune them out and really focus on the setting that you're in that moment is really critical to being the most successful you can be.
Absolutely. I think for me, the 2 points that really stood out, the guy talked about, I'm going to kind of combine them, is making a study plan and prioritizing what's most critical to you. I think is especially as you go deeper into the planning for these professional exams, being able to zero in on the subject matters or the topics that you're struggling the most with, and then being very active on how you're going to kind of fix or improve upon those areas. And so I think having a game plan week to week is really important, especially if you're using the summertime or downtime to study, or you're doing it in the semester and you're already busy. By having it planned out, you're almost building it into your kind of agenda for the week or monthly, and you're going to see how that plan is going to pay off, down the road. I think 2 months after you're studying and everything.
Yeah, definitely, Emilio. That's really important, the prioritizing piece, for sure.
All right, doing research.
Yeah, so this just piggybacks off what we were speaking of before, and really highlighting how important it is to do your research and really knowing what that goal score is for you, and making just a study prep time for yourself, ensuring that you have time to fit this into all the other responsibilities that you have as a student, or maybe you're even in a gap year and have some responsibilities during that time. You just want to make sure you're allotting the time to study, as well as just making a list of schools and ensuring that you know test dates. I know a lot of students have been affected right now with COVID-19, and that, affecting testing dates being canceled, things like that. So just being updated with all of the websites of these different programs or the specific program that you're looking into.
Right, so tutoring and testing and pre-health advising, some really good resources. Which one of our experts are tackling this one?
That'll be me. So it's great that we do have Stephanie and Courtney here from our Tutoring and Testing Center, because I feel like they're some of the best resources that we have for students to know what's available for them to feel as prepared as possible and maybe even as stress-free as possible, since that's even a big piece that Gabby mentioned earlier. Going into these tests feeling like you are confident and knowing that you can tackle those exams. So some of those resources that Tutoring and Testing has on campus that I know Stephanie and Courtney will go a little bit more into later would be the academic success coaching that they have going on both all throughout the academic school year. They have some proctored practice exams for you to be able to kind of simulate that environment that we talked about and learn how to tune out those distractions, see what it's like to actually be in that zone with the same time requirements that they would give you in the real setting too, which can be really important for you to understand what your pacing is going to be like. Some study materials that we'll talk about too, just so you can know what you can check out, used in terms of like flashcards. And then lastly, the winter workshops, which involve, like Stephanie will mention later, some of the stress-free workshops they mentioned too, because that's a huge piece to understanding yourself and being really as holistically healthy as possible going into these and feeling confident. And then lastly, we have NSU's pre-health professions advising. So that's a big collaboration on campus we have between our Tutoring and Testing Center, our Academic Advising Office, and us, our Career Development Office, just for us to all together support you pre-health students in understanding what resources you have on campus and how we can best advise you in doing well on your tests, preparing your CVs, personal statements, everything that makes you feel really prepared going into that pre-health program that you're applying for. And then just navigating a little bit on the website for the Tutoring and Testing Center, they have a really cool resource where you're able to kind of note down a sheet of like a schedule of how you would like to study and map out what your week looks like for studying, practicing, and preparing for those exams. So like I've been working with most of my pre-health students for a while, I know they're balancing a lot of other things besides just preparing for their tests. Oftentimes they're also doing classes and shadowing and volunteering, and having something like this can help you note down what are those major goals you want to have for each of the days of the week, and knowing realistically what times you have available. That way you can set some goals that make you feel really accomplished by the end of the week of what you've been able to really study on and keep track of.
All right. And so, as we mentioned, we have two great experts from our tutoring and testing office, and we're going to be putting them on the hot seat right now and asking them some great questions that we feel would be probably most beneficial for students. So I'll open it up to Stephanie and Courtney. Let's start off with, what are the study materials and resources students can use at the TTC to prepare for exams?
So I will jump in and take the first question, Amelia. The main thing that we have in the Tutoring and Testing Center to help students is a lending library of study guides. So we recognize that there is a lot of costs associated with preparing for these exams. You know, the exams themselves they have fees associated with them, and preparing for them, it can start to really add up. There's so many different companies out there and different kinds of books, and so we have a fairly comprehensive library of preparation material, whether it's books or flashcards, depending on the test that you're preparing for, that you can borrow from us at no charge, and that can kind of get you started. So you could either borrow it from us and then decide the company that you like and make an investment in a book, or just borrow it from us if that's really your best option. We have some that you can take home. We have some that you can use in the center. So hopefully when we all get back on campus, using them in the center will be a thing again. We'll have to see what all of that looks like as the future comes. But we have those available for really all of the main tests that are out there. And then if you do have the ability to make an investment, there are just a range of test prep companies that you can go to as well. So like I think Gabby already mentioned Kaplan, there's classes that you can take. Those are things that we don't necessarily organize in the center, but an easy Google search will bring up a ton of different things. And there's also free things as well. So I think it's always great to point out that you don't always have to pour money into these things. You know, that's a great time about like 2020 between Khan Academy and all of these different resources. If you know the areas that you really need to study in, you don't have to necessarily spend money. There's ways that you can do it in a more economical way. So depending on whatever your situation is, we've got things that we can help you with, or we can help point you in the right direction of some other things as well off campus.
That's great. That's a huge resource to really help students out, and I think something they should take advantage of within their first steps of planning out their study plan.
Yeah, it's really popular. Stephanie does a great job of staying on top of when there's new additions and when there's changes to exams, so that we're sure that the information that we have is helpful and will work well for the version of the test that you're planning on taking.
Awesome. So that was great, Courtney. Thank you. So now our next question is, what are your tips for students for self-care and to effectively manage their study time? I think one of the biggest things I think with general tips that we talked about was managing their time effectively, and that's self-care. What are some strategies or tips that you could provide for that?
So self-care, especially as you get closer to your test date, is extremely important. So creating a weekly schedule, but actually scheduling times for self-care is what I would highly recommend. So setting a bedtime for yourself. I know it's silly, but as you get closer, you don't want to forego sleep when it's so important to memory and retention of information. So making sure you get that 7 to 9 hours of sleep, making sure that you're eating healthy, well-balanced meals, because that's so important for your brain, for your body. Making sure you exercise, you're getting out that energy, that stress, and you're scheduling time for fun, for time with your family, to communicate with others so you have that brain break. If you need help developing that weekly schedule, we do have academic success coaches in our office that can really help you figure out when to tie in that self-care time.
Awesome. Yeah, planning it out. Not a lot of people think about when they're building out their schedule to build out time for things that are going to make them successful, even if it's meditation, a chance to take a break, watch your TV show, or spend time with family. I think that detailed scheduling should also include the things that make you balance more than anything else.
Mhm.
Some really good tips.
All right, so Stephanie, I know you just touched on this, but can you tell us a little bit more about the academic success coaching that you guys offer?
I can go ahead and take that one. So academic success coaching is a program that we've had in the Tutoring and Testing Center for, gosh, this academic year was our like second, I think, right, Steph? Is that right? Yeah, our second full year of having coaching. So right now we currently have one graduate student on staff. And then we have a group of peer success coaches as well. And so these are individuals that work in the center that have been trained to help students with, I always like to say, like, the art of being a student. It's not specifically subject based. It's about all the things that you have to do to be successful in the classroom, regardless of what your major is. So the way that you can utilize that when you're preparing for one of these exams is to come in and talk about the exam, talk about your timeline of how long you have before you're actually taking the exam. You can look at the courses that you've already taken that will help you to be successful, and also look at the courses that you'll take in between that initial meeting and the exam, so that you can come up with a study plan and come up with some goals that make sense and that are manageable and attainable. So you're not just doing it on your own. You have someone that has been trained, that has experience on all of these things, and can kind of help guide you. Because depending on the amount of time that you have to study and the classes that you've already taken, you know, if we were going to prepare for an exam, my study routine and Stephanie's study routine are probably not going to be the same thing. So this is a really great opportunity for you to get something that's personalized and that is manageable for you, because the success coach will also look into all of the other things that you're doing. And that's kind of something we've already touched on. You know, if you're studying during the regular academic year, you have your regular course load, you have your engagement on campus, maybe you have a job, you have your family, you know, there's a lot to balance. And if you're studying in the summertime, you know, there's not as much to balance, but sometimes that's worse, because when you have more free time, it's really easy to put things off. So to be able to come in and get this plan that is really tailored to you and your goals, and come up with goals, and then have someone that's kind of like an accountability buddy for you as well, because you'll come in and maybe you meet with Sarah and you make this plan, and then you come back a month later and meet with Sarah and talk about how it's going, and maybe make some tweaks if you need to, but you have someone that's looking out for you and that's going to ask you maybe the tough questions to make sure that you're staying on track. So it's a really good resource, and it doesn't cost anything. You know, we always like to throw that out. You're technically already paying for all of these things in your student services fee. So it makes the most sense to make the most of the money you're spending at NSU. And so coming in and meeting with a coach and building that relationship will really help you in the long run in preparing for the exam, but also probably just in your regular planning of your life and your classes as well. Because when we have that schedule of things, we're just always more successful.
Thank you so much, Courtney. This is amazing. And I can imagine many students don't even know about this resource. So I'm glad that we're talking about it today. Can I ask you one follow-up question to that? Like, is there a limit as to how many times a student can meet with a coach during the semester?
Oh, that's a really good question, because we do have some limitations for tutoring and things like that kind of follow guidelines of, you know, tutoring hours versus like in the classroom hours. Stephanie, do we have limits? Have we set up limits on coaching?
We do follow the tutoring guidelines, so we try not to do more than 3 hours a week, though I think students are fine with less than 3 hours a week, but we encourage them to come back on a weekly basis anyway. So when they meet with a coach, they might set a general foundation, but the coach wants to follow up on those goals that you set in a coaching meeting. So you'll come back and kind of talk about what you've been working on within the last week or two, and kind of develop a more specific plan for the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I love that it could be on a weekly basis, and having that accountability buddy, like you said, Courtney, is exactly how I would describe this. Thank you, guys. All right. For our next question, what should a student expect when coming in for a practice exam?
Taking a practice exam in the testing center is a great way to get the experience of what test day will really be like. A lot of times when you're practicing for exams at home or just at your own desk or on your bed, it's not the same feeling of being uncomfortable in a place unknown, or having your phone locked up in a locker rather than right there. So I do encourage students to take at least one of their practice exams in testing services. The testing center is made up of mostly private testing rooms, and we have one small testing lab that seats 7 students. So when students call to set up this practice appointment, we give them the flexibility of whatever they prefer. If they want a private testing room to kind of just focus and go through a full-length exam, or if they want to take it in a testing lab and have other students coming in and out taking different exams to kind of see how they manage that. We do provide them a locker, so when they get in, they have to lock up all of their personal belongings, including their cell phones, snacks, water, and then they can only access those snacks during their 10-minute break or their 30-minute break, whatever is associated with their exam. We do have a space in our center where we can have them hang out during that break time, but we really encourage it to be as close to the test day as possible. So in doing that full-length exam, taking only their breaks, not leaving the building.
Thank you. That's awesome. I love how you really mimic the testing day for the student. Also have like those 2 different environments the student can be in, either solo or with other students. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Resources and tips so far. I think, Danny, is this yours? Being able to put our amazing experts on the hot seat again.
Yes, that would be me. The next question I would ask was, how soon should a student start to prepare for their professional exam? Since I know we talked a lot about them setting up that planning schedule so they really know what their goals are. So how soon do you think they should start?
Generally, students usually start preparing with 3 to 6 months before they take the test. That gives them enough time to really like devote some study time to getting prepared. And when you're creating that plan, the amount of time you have before the test, obviously it plays a big factor in how much preparing you do. So the earlier you start, the longer you have, you're not as intense at first. If you start closer, then you definitely have to start off more intense. So we would recommend giving yourself more time, but not too much time either, because something to remember, especially when you're looking at the MCAT and those exams, is they might be, if you start too early, they might be asking you information on classes that you haven't taken yet. So it's just a good idea to give yourself like enough time, but not too much time. So like 6 months is a good starting range. And something else to consider is, technically you really start preparing for these exams as soon as you're in the class, you know, with the MCAT, with the PCAT, with the DAT, all of these things, they're asking you bio 1 questions, Chem 1 Physics 1 questions, so you really start preparing in class. So making sure that you are utilizing resources and being successful in the classroom so that when you do go to prepare, you're not so much having to reteach yourself information that you didn't fully understand the first time, or revisit things that you just don't remember. If you start off with a solid foundation, it only makes it easier in the long run. So making sure that you're even if you're just in your first year, but you know that you're looking towards a DO program or a pharmacy program, maybe taking a look at what those courses are that they're going to ask you about on the test, so you really just know what you're preparing for. And NSU has so many great resources as far as like making connections with older students and getting in pre-professional societies where people can help you with all of that and give you some really good tips. But so that you're kind of always preparing, because that solid foundation is what's going to do the best for you. And then when you know the areas that you need to focus on because you've taken some practice exams, you can hone your studying in as well. If you're really strong in general chemistry, but organic kind of kicks your butt, that you want to spend more time focusing on organic when you're studying than on the other things. And so you can really like make a plan that will work best for you.
That's great. Thank you, Courtney. And I like that you kind of keep in mind for the students, like I know a lot of my students, they think they're starting from scratch with all of these studyings, but like you said, a lot of what they're learning comes from their courses too. So I think that's a great thing to point out, and focusing specifically on their own strengths and what's going to be the best for them to pace out. So thanks for that.
Yeah, something that we always use as a selling point for getting a job in the tutoring and testing center is, that our students that work as tutors work with all of these classes all the time, because students are always coming in for help. And so they have their skills stay fresh. So that's another good way to prepare. Just a plug for us if you're looking for a job on campus. Serving as a math or science tutor or as an SI leader, it's a great opportunity to continue to work in these areas and help your peers. And when you look at like the level of understanding, we know that you really understand something when you can teach it to someone else. So just another little hot tip there and a plug for our office, because we're always looking for more tutors.
Yeah, that's a great plug. And I've definitely always heard that too, that if you can teach it, you learn it a lot better. So that's definitely true.
And what a great selling point if you are going to professional school, especially for pre-health, that you have an experience where you've worked one-on-one with people, you've had to use different type of communication skills, because I feel like one big part of a skill needed as a tutor and as a health professional is taking that complex information and putting it in understandable terms. So another skill you could sell on your resume by doing that experience.
Oh, 100%. That, working one-on-one with people, interacting with students, that is great practice for someone who's looking to go in healthcare. And it's another great selling point of why it's a good idea to have a job on campus, especially with us.
Perfect.
All right, so my next question is kind of a follow-up to something we talked about earlier, but what do the proctored practice exams look like, and how often are they offered per year?
Okay, so when you purchase a study guide, usually it comes with between 4 or 5 practice exams. So I want to challenge everyone listening to this webinar, if you are planning to become or planning on taking any of these tests, commit to doing 1 practice exam in the testing center. It's just a unique experience. You really get what it's like on test day, and we're really flexible working with student schedules. So we do offer reserved seats all year round, and we are open usually during the summer, during winter break, during spring break. So even if you wanted to do it after the semester is over, you can reserve a time to do it in our office. We do have study guides available with additional practice exams. So if you are looking for additional practice questions, you can take one of those paper exams. Though a majority of students want to take one of those fully online exams because they're more like what you'll see test day. For two of the more popular exams, the GRE and the MCAT, we have additional resources. So for the GRE, they have created 3 practice exams for free. So we have downloaded those ETS exams already on our lab computers. So when you set up an appointment, you can jump on one of those exams immediately and spend your 4 hours just focusing on that. And then with the MCAT, we do offer a mock MCAT 3 times a year. So if you wanted to take one of the AAMC exams in a small group setting, you could do that. We do it in groups of 7, and it's always the week after classes end. So after finals week in winter, that next week we'll do it during spring break, and then again in summer. And it's really good experience because everyone in the room is taking an MCAT exam. So you kind of compare yourself to what's going on around you. When are they taking their breaks? How long are they spending on their breaks? Stuff that you'll do test day. So kind of get that experience and learning how are you going to deal with other people in the room shaking their chair or writing on their little paper. How are you going to deal with that? This kind of gives you that experience to come up with those coping skills.
Yeah, I think that's so great for them to have that immersive opportunity to see what it really feels like in that setting. I was also curious, do you know how long it takes for them to receive the scores back, or if it's an automatic thing after finishing the exams?
So for the practice exam, it's automatic. And then with the AAMC, they can log back into their account and look at all of their answers, see what they got wrong, really reflect and come up with a better plan for prioritizing their study time based on what they maybe need to work on more.
Oh, that's great. And it's kind of like based on what Gabby was saying earlier, they can help make their goal score from there, kind of gauging where their strengths are. So that's fantastic. And then to our last question is, what are some lasting pieces of advice you have for those students preparing for these entrance exams? Oh, Courtney, I think you might be muted.
I am. I'll get the hang of this one day. So one thing that I really want to reiterate is just remembering that you really start preparing when you're taking the classes initially, and that we have so many resources on campus to be successful in your class, that if you really, want to have that strong foundation to be successful, just utilize your resources. So, going to tutoring, going to your SI sessions if you have them, creating a study group with your friends that have similar goals that you can study with, using academic success coaching, joining a pre-professional society so that you can network with other people that have these goals. And then you can, just use those resources that are here so that you can have the foundation. It's just really important to just help you in your studying. And then also, we've talked a lot about like the practice exams and distractions and like really getting prepared for it. And I think something else that's important to just think about is that these exams are not only intellectual, but it is a bit of like a mental challenge, that you are going to have to sit in the same chair for hours and hours and hours to take this test. And so keeping that in mind as well, that when you're doing practice exams, that you're staying in your seat and that you're thinking about that you're not only training yourself on math and science and your writing and your critical thinking skills, but you're training yourself to sit there and to focus. So don't forget that piece also.
Yeah, I think those are all great pieces of advice, because I think it's a huge, mental challenge to be in those settings. So preparing you even for those professional programs where it will be entirely a mental challenge, I think that's crucial to think about. So thank you for those lasting pieces, and plus all the advice that you've shared. I think this is valuable not just for our students, but for even Gabby and Emilio and myself to really know the resources that you all offer in your office.
Before we get into this last slide on our career development resources, Stephanie, Courtney, how can a student go about scheduling an appointment or visiting your office?
So with testing services for mock exams, you just give us a call to reserve a seat. And within that conversation, figure out exactly what time you want to start, if you want a private room or work in the lab. For academic success coaching, you can go through grades first. So if you log your Sharp link, there's the grade first icon, same place where you make advising or tutoring appointments. Click on coaching and you can schedule it based on your schedule.
And we do have coaches right now in the summertime. So if you're preparing, if you're starting to prepare, you could have an appointment as early as like next week.
Yeah, the two coaches that we have are graduate students. They'll do their appointments through Zoom. One of our coaches, Sarah, she's in the occupational therapy program, so she understands studying for these exams while balancing other things that you have to do when you are a pre-health major. So it's a really good opportunity. Highly recommend to set up an appointment early.
And in addition to your testing, you have your career development office to help you plan out your applications to graduate school, career exploration, building up your resume, or if you do become one of those tutors, success coaches, you have a team that can help you add that to your resume and sell that within interviews. But our offices work hand in hand, part of your pre-health advising, including academic advising. We're here to support you, and we hope that today's webinar was able to give you a lot of tips and insights on how to go about preparing for these professional exams. And I wanted to thank all of our experts, including our two guests today, for sharing their insight, talking about their office, and really giving students some really great tools and resources that are available to them as they prepare for these exams.
Thank you so much for having us. This was fun to be involved and give advice to students and just get to talk about what we do in the office. So thank you.
Thank you for being here.